Even if it takes you a little longer to reach your goals, you'll be much happier in the process if you have some fun money in there.
Hi, friend. Welcome to Gather in Growth, a show created for passionate, growth-focused rural women like you. From mindset work and building strong habits to exploring the unique joys and challenges of living rural, this is a show to leave you feeling joyful, inspired, and a little less alone. Together, we're on a journey of reaching for the most confident, healthy, and authentic version of ourselves, and I'm forever grateful to have you by my side. Whether you're currently running on a back road, shuffling kids to town, hopping along for a tractor ride, or 3 loads deep into folding laundry, grab yourself a nice coffee and let's dive in. Hi, friends. Welcome back to Gather in Growth. Today, I'm excited to welcome a new friend, Alli Williams, to the podcast. We are going to be talking about all things money, which I'm not going to lie is something, I think a conversation that I need because I'm not a person that identifies as someone who loves math or budgeting or finances. And so I'm not going to lie, when you originally emailed me, I'm like, oh, but knowing what you do and what you help women with, I'm like, okay, not only is someone else going to get something good out of this conversation, but Emily, you probably also need to hear it. So Alli, welcome.
Thanks for having me. I know it's not a topic most people instantly are going to gravitate towards, but I swear we'll make it fun, interesting, and some actionable tips. So I'm excited about the conversation at least.
That is a very lofty promise. I'm going to make this fun and interesting. I'm excited to see where this goes. But for someone getting to know you for the first time, tell us a little bit about who you are, where you live, what got you into even having this conversation, and ultimately what you're doing today.
Yeah, so I'm Alli. I am a mom of 2 little boys, 2.5 and 1. So my life's a hectic mess. I thrive in chaos, and that's my life right now. We live in South Carolina and recently bought our forever home, which is 25-acre farm, and we only have dogs right now, but the previous owner had cows. So we have like pasture set up and different things. So one day we'll get more, but pretty much my story is I became debt-free at 25. How old am I? I'll be 32. So I'm 30, I'm 31, being debt-free at 25 and married into $154,000 of debt. So my husband had 6 figures of debt. I had 0 at that time. And then we worked to pay off debt while still saving, investing, spending on things we love. And that's my mission. I work with mostly women and couples, just helping them create that realistic plan they can actually stick to. So you can pay off debt, you can save, invest, get things for your kids while still spending on things you love. No deprivation here. So it's kind of my mission is to just make money more conversational, less scary, less overwhelming. So people aren't scared to check their accounts or scared, of swiping the card or whatever, all those things. So like I said in the beginning, money can be fun. And that's my goal of this episode is that you feel at least a little bit more like that towards the end.
Yes. Okay. So aside from like your personal experience and you and your husband getting together and working towards where you've gotten today, I think I'm just always so interested in what people's stories are, especially entrepreneurs who are doing really unique things in the world. So has money and investing and finances always been the trajectory of your career or passion, or how did that come about thinking about 18-year-old you to now?
Yeah, so when I graduated college at 21, I did, the quote unquote adult thing and bought a new car because I needed a car. And my car payment, thankfully, I didn't have expensive taste in cars, but it was still a new car. It's the car I still have. It's a 2013 Hyundai Tucson. But my car payment was like $415. And I was like, how do people pay their bills? Like at 21, I'm like, how does this work? How do I I'm 21 and all the information I was reading out there is if you want to pay off debt or save, you have to stay in your house and, eat ramen every day. And I was like, sounds so terrible. I'm not doing any of this. My business actually started as a blog in 2017. I just started after a few years sharing what I learned, what I was doing. And then it kind of organically, people were like, wait, how did you do that? Like, how are you doing this? And from there, I got into one-on-one coaching, developed my signature program, Flourish Financially, which now is kind of my main thing just because of kids. I don't have as much time for calls anymore. So as my life changed, my business model changed. I have my MBA in finance, which I went back for. So I have the quote unquote school knowledge of it now. I mean, I studied business in school. I never thought that I'd be helping people with their money. Pretty much at 21, I was like, I don't want to work until I'm 70. That sounds terrible, but I also want to live my life as a 20-something-year-old. And so how do I do this? How do I figure out how to pay off debt and save and invest, but still travel? And I'm a big college football fan. We have like season tickets to my alma mater, and we've kept those even while paying off debt because I was like, that's the one thing like I refuse to cut. Like football season is like life for me. So finding those things are important, cutting the rest. I know it's a podcast, so you can't see, but like I wear the same like 3 shirts from Target like every day. Like I don't care about like clothes or things like that. I don't spend a lot on that, but I do spend a lot on going out with friends or travel or football. Or my husband's new thing is we just saved to buy a tractor. He cares about that stuff. I care about college football. But anyway, the point I'm trying to make is I didn't think this was my plan, but it's been a lot. I love it. I love seeing people like the light bulb moment when it switches of like going from like, I'm in this hole, I don't know how I'm going to get out, to like, oh my gosh, like we're actually doing it and we can do this. Because if I can do it, anyone can. Like I'm no one special. I just figured out a way to do it and went all in. And it's definitely worth it getting your finances together. I can tell you that.
Yeah. So when you're working with clients or even just over the years of building your business, what have been some of the biggest limiting beliefs or lies that people believe that really hold them back from getting to where they could be?
Yeah, I think the main one is people, especially now on social media, they're like, oh, their income is higher than mine. I can't do that. Or, well, you make all these excuses of like, well, they must have something I don't, or that's why they're able to do it. And I've worked with people who make $30,000 a year, and I've worked with people who make 300 plus $1,000 a year, and they come to me for the same reason. Everyone is coming to me for the same reason: is there's something in their finances that isn't working. Or I've worked with people who have no debt, people who have multiple 6 figures of debt, all different income levels. So I always tell people it's not necessarily how much you make, right? It's what you do with it, because you can make 200,000 or 300 or whatever and spend all of it, or you can make 50 or 60 and spend half of it, and you're much better off than that person making more. I think one of the biggest limiting beliefs is just there's no way I can do it. My situation's too unique. I can't do this. And it might take you longer than someone else. I'm not saying that everyone has the same path or time frame. I mean, paying off $100,000 might take someone 6 months if they make a lot of money, and it might take someone 6 years if they have other factors, but it doesn't mean you both can't do it. It's just, your journeys might look a little different. So if you really do want to become debt free or save or whatever other money goal or multiple money goals you want to reach, you 100% can do it. It's just, you kind of sometimes have to put the blinders on and just focus on your own financial journey and not worry about what your neighbors are doing or buying, like buying a new boat or buying a new truck or whatever. You're like, oh my God. But you don't know if that was like a loan or what their financial situation is. So it's really easy to compare ourselves to others, but I truly haven't met someone that I haven't been able to help in some way reach their goals. So it's possible for anyone.
So for someone listening to this that's nodding along, like, okay, talk me into it. What are some even first steps? Because I feel like some of the goals that you're talking about sound really good, but can feel really overwhelming and scary. And if there's anything that we talk about on this podcast, it's like what it looks like to take a really big, impossible goal and break it down into tangible steps, focus on what's right in front of you while also holding space for the long-term vision. So clients come to work with you. Obviously, all of their situations are different, but what are some of the first things that you're doing with them to get them on the right track?
Yeah. So people always want to start with like creating a budget. And for me, even in my program, like budgeting's module 4, like kind of step 4, like there's other things you have to do first. And a lot of people want to rush right into budgeting. So the first thing you need to do, no matter where you are, is what I call a money audit. So pretty much you're going to, and this takes, depending on what you already have or don't have, this can take a day, this could take a week, this could take a month. It just depends on your finances, but you're pretty much going to write down every single thing related to your finances. So you're going to log into all your accounts, which honestly, for a lot of people, is a truly scary step because if you know that you've been overspending, you might be like, I don't even want to see my credit card. And that might just be one step by itself where you do just that for the day and you like take a break because that might just cause you a lot of anxiety. So first you need to know exactly your current state. So log into all checking accounts, how much do you have in savings, how many saving accounts do you have, write down all of your debt, what types of debt, interest rates, minimum payments, like literally the whole audit of everything. Track your expenses for 1 month. I always say choose an average month. AK for most people, don't choose December with the holidays. You're probably spending way more. So like not a good month. But for example, if June, you didn't really travel much, you didn't have much going on, like track what was happening in June. If you've done this before, but you haven't done it in the last 3-ish months, do it again because a lot has been changing with inflation and things. So even if you thought you spend $200 a week on groceries a year ago, you might be spending 300 or 400 now, unfortunately. So yeah, you want to start and just get the whole picture. And for some people, like I said, they can do that in a day. Some people that takes a week or longer. But before you try to rush into breaking down goals, even setting goals or budgeting, you need to know what is happening today. What are your current numbers? So that's always the first step, no matter your income, debt, anything. It's a terrible step, but it's needed step.
Yeah. Well, I think that's so transferable to no matter what you're working on. Like, really understanding where you're at and inventorying how you're spending your time, like what, and so many different things, meeting yourself where you're at. And then from there, being able to build out, okay, where do we go from here? So, okay, we sit down, we open all the apps, we do the scary thing, we understand where our money's going. Now what?
Okay, so from there, once you know where your money's going, then you're going to set like, I always say 1 to 3 kind of short-term goals. So things that you want to do in the next maybe 3 years or so. If we get too far out, it's just harder to like plan. I mean, obviously we all want things further out, but for now, what are smaller goals that you have in the next 3 years? So maybe that is to become credit card debt free. Maybe you have $20,000, whatever, of credit card debt, or save for a house or buy a car. I don't know, breaking down where you want to be, or have 4 months saved in an emergency fund, or whatever it is. You're going to write down your 1 to 3 kind of main priorities. What are the things that like instantly, without really thinking about it, come to mind of, okay, if I can get this figured out, I'd feel a lot better. And then from there, you're going to use your audit and your goals to start constructing your budget. And your budget is going to look different for everyone. I personally, what I like teach and what I like to do is budgeting per paycheck. I just think, I mean, because realistically, right, how many people, and you can virtually raise your hand, have attempted to create a budget? You just write down your income, write down your expenses, and then you're like, all right, created a budget, check. And then you never actually look at it. You don't do anything with it. You just like checked it off your list for the month. You wrote down income and expenses. And that's what most people do, or what they consider a budget, is just like income, expenses, subtract them, move on with your day. And so I recommend budgeting per paycheck because you're pretty much allocating the bills that are going to be paid from each paycheck so you can stay current or ahead versus like behind. So for us, for example, like my husband gets paid weekly, I get paid twice a month, so we budget weekly. So everyone's per paycheck is going to look different. Even if you do get paid once a month, you're still going to check in weekly. So you're going to have like your monthly budget, but you're updating it weekly. So I always recommend doing a budget per paycheck. So if you're paid weekly, you would have a weekly budget, mini budgets. It helps you for a lot of reasons. One, you can see if your first half of the month is really heavy, which it is for 90% of the people I work with, just because that's when like rent or mortgage is usually due. A lot of your big expenses are due before the 15th of the month for a lot of people. So a lot of people I work with are like, oh my God, I feel like I have no money the first half of the month. And the second half of the month, you're like, oh, I'm doing great. And then all of a sudden it's a cycle again of not doing okay for 2 weeks and then feeling like you have money. It's because a lot of your bills are front loaded in the beginning of the month. So when you see it per paycheck or see it weekly, or at least you're, managing it weekly, you can spread out bills. I have people, including myself, where I like split my mortgage between the parts of the month so that like it's not all due, not all paid at the beginning of the month. So budgeting per paycheck just allows you to see when things are due, and also allows you to make either debt payments or saving transfers throughout the month. Because another thing I see a lot which we've all been there, is like you have really great intentions, like I'm going to save $500 this month. And then it gets to the end of the month and that $500 you allocated for savings is now 200 because you spent it on something else. So if you're making debt payments, saving transfers throughout the month, you're less likely to just like go in and see that money in your account sitting there and you're like, oh, actually, I have extra money. And then you spend it. So pretty much money audit, set some small goals, and then you start to construct your budget.
Okay, so for someone who's sitting here listening to you and their anxiety is just like growing, like the idea of a budget just makes them want to throw up because I think for a lot of people can be so restricting. And so a lot of people live in the space of like either I'm really faithful to my budget, and then there's other people who are like, it's fine. It's in God's hands. Hi, it's me. I love you mentioned like having a realistic, flexible budget for someone who's like coming into this first time that has a lot of fear around the regimen of budgeting and like the strictness and having no flexibility, no freedom, and just not being comfortable with that. How can we budget and have our financial goals in mind without feeling that like captive weight on our shoulders?
So I think the first thing is I don't care if you call it a budget, right? Like if the word budget makes the hair on your arm stand up or gives you anxiety, call it a spending plan, call it, I don't know, call it whatever you want. I don't care. Like the word budget just gets like that very bad, obviously, like rep with people it just seems very strict. But at the end of the day, all a budget is just telling your money where to go. And the best part is you're the one creating it. So you get to decide. There's no one else deciding where your money gets to go except for you. I mean, you can listen to people, books or what people say you should do, but at the end of the day, you're creating it. So if it's restrictive, that's your own fault. That's what I tell people. If your budget's really restricting, that's because you created it to be, because no one else is doing it for you. Or maybe your partner is, and maybe you need to have a conversation about that. But if it's really restricting, then the best part is you get to change that. And one way I think that's easy or helps you keep it less restrictive is making sure you have, I just call it fun money. I'm not a creative person. If you couldn't tell, my brain does not work on the creative side. It's so anything that I do or create is like very straightforward on names. Like I'm not someone who's going to think of creative names. But anyway, your budget should have fun money in it. And that is money that you get to spend on whatever you want because it's a budgeted amount. And for my husband and I, we pretty much get an allowance, as the easiest way to put it is we have our finances combined. It's just so much easier for me because I'm the one that's like paying our bills and doing everything. So it makes my life a lot easier to have it all combined. And then we have separate, pretty much spending accounts, separate checking accounts that I transfer money into each month. And that's our like fun money, no questions asked money. We don't have to check in with each other. We don't need to allocate it because that amount is already budgeted. So it doesn't matter what it goes to. Kind of allows us to have our, I don't want to say like individual freedom because we obviously discuss things, but it kind of allows you to spend on things that you each want that maybe they're not as important to your partner. Like for me, a lot of my things are online purchases or like food. And like, I don't know. I truly don't know what my husband spends it on because I really do not care. So having fun money in your budget, even if you're single and you're not married, is so important to just keep you on track and really prioritizing the things in your budget that you truly value and then drastically cutting the things you don't. Like I said, I get my hair cut like once a year. My husband cuts his own hair. Like we don't care about that stuff. I don't get my nails done. I don't buy a lot. I don't care about designer things. But for some people, that's something they truly value. They want to spend money on that. And that's great. I'll never tell someone what they should or shouldn't spend money on. But if you don't care about that stuff, then you have to like drastically cut it so you do have room to spend on things you do care about. So for someone who is kind of scared of the word budget, I think if you feel like it's restrictive, like I said, that's because you made it restrictive or your partner made it restrictive, and you need to have those conversations on why. And maybe it takes you a little bit longer to reach your goals with having some fun money in there, but I promise you will enjoy the process a lot more and you're way more likely to actually stick to it. Because what I see a lot, even similar to dieting, right? You go all in and you cut everything and maybe you do lose some weight, you get some quick wins, but that's not sustainable. You can't do that for 4 years, 5 years. And the thing about money is you're going to be spending money for the rest of your life. So you need a plan that you can change and adapt pretty much forever. This isn't going anywhere. So if you do that super restrictive model or you're depriving yourself, it's not going to last another 50 years or whatever. So even if it takes you a little longer to reach your goals, you'll be much happier in the process if you have some fun money in there.
Hey friend, are you ready to take your growth to the next level? Do you crave building meaningful connections with like-minded women who get you? Then you need to be at the Ascend Retreat. My upcoming Ascend Retreat is a 4-day event that will be held in Gulf Shores, Alabama from March 14th through 17th. During the retreat, you'll have the opportunity to connect with other real women who are passionate about personal growth, gain clarity around your goals and priorities that are keeping you awake at night, learn from experienced coaches and mentors, including Kylie Epperson, Coach Kaya, and yours truly, create an action plan to bring your dream life to fruition, and participate in workshops, guided activities, and individualized coaching that will not only help you grow and evolve, but shed the limiting beliefs that are keeping you stuck. So what are you waiting for? Register for Ascend today and start the journey to becoming the most aligned, healthy, and purpose-driven version of you. Links to learn more and register are in today's show notes. But wait, there's more. You catch that cheesy reference? Podcast listeners can use code GATHER to save $200 off retreat registration through the month of September. Again, code GATHER at checkout to save $200. I simply cannot wait to ascend with you on the beach this March.
Yeah, I love just how much you bring home the point of figuring out what you actually want. Because I think so often we just arbitrarily pick a goal without reverse engineering. What does this actually mean in my everyday life? And then there's a misalignment because there's frustration because we're not reading the goal. Or like you said, we go all in on it, but then all these other factors are at play and then we're like miserable. So we go off track. It's like sitting and having that conversation with yourself of what are my priorities? And then how do I create goals based on that? Okay, maybe the debt won't be paid off as quickly, but I still feel like I have the flexibility and freedom to live my lifestyle that I want to have. Okay, great. But now you have a goal that realistically matches that. And so I love, like whether it's football tickets or whether it's getting your nails done or whether it's investing in X, Y, and Z, but if you know what you want your life to look like and can create the goals, financial or otherwise, that match that and reverse engineer it, I love that you just talk about how that sets you up for so much more success because you're actually building a lifestyle that's in alignment with what you want.
Right. And with social media, right, like we see a lot of the end goal, like we see where people end up, but we don't see the journey. For example, like I said, we last year moved into we're not moving again. We have horses as neighbors on this side, and I don't know about this side, but we bought our 25 acres. We don't hear anyone, and people are like, wow, look at you. But they also don't see that before that we lived in a pretty much 700 square foot 2-bed 1-bath house with 2 kids at one point in a really not great area to save money to do things. And yes, we're here, but there were things we had to do to save to get to this point. And I don't regret any part of it, but, I think it is really easy to focus on especially with social media these days, to see, wow, look how great, they have it. But you don't see the other things that happened before to get there, or you don't see that they really just have massive amounts of debt. But, my point is you don't see the behind the closed doors of what's really happening. So that's why, back to what I said earlier, it's so important to, like you said, figure out your own priorities, or if you are married, figure out you as a couple, what are the things that are important to you, and go all in on what is important to you, and try to block out a lot of the outside noise and what other people are doing. Because like a lot of our friends have like new build houses and whatever, and like where you can like touch your neighbor's house pretty much, and we were like, that sounds so terrible, like, and their house is gorgeous inside. Like, we have a lot of work we want to do here, and it's going to take us 10 years or more to really get this where we want it, because I won't take out loans or anything for it. But we're content. We know our plan, and it might not be someone else's. Some people would probably not want to live here, but that doesn't matter. So you need to figure out the few things you care about, and then really make that budget or spending plan, whatever you want to call it, realistic. And back to the flexible part is knowing your budget is not going to work every month, right? Like, things pop up, especially when you have kids or other things going on. There's always things going on. So you need to know how to adjust that budget so you don't just throw in the towel and be like, well, didn't work. Like I tried and then you give up. So really focusing on that realistic to your life and then keeping it flexible so you can make adjustments, I think is really important.
Yeah. Another thing that I love that you brought up is the conversations with your partner. When you both maybe have different mindsets or incomes look different. And so, how do you invite couples to get on the same page or have conversations around this, whether maybe one spouse is making more or one spouse is coming in with existing debt or one spouse is coming in with inheritance and one is a spender, one is a save. Like there's so many nuances, not only within ourselves to figure out with finances, but in doing life with someone else, that can be a huge tension point. So how do we have those kind of conversations?
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing that people like underestimate in a marriage is obviously everyone knows that money is like the pretty much the second leading cause of divorce, but obviously being open and honest. So for example, for us, if you couldn't tell by this podcast, I am very type A and like I love spreadsheets and all that. And my husband's like, no, like that's not how he operates. And we had our first quote unquote budget meeting when we were engaged. And I came with like a binder, like literally a binder. And like all this stuff, we were into the kitchen table and I was like, okay, we're going to go over all this. And he just looked at me and was like, no. And I was just like, what do you mean you don't like that? Like for me, I truly love this. Like I could look at numbers, budgets all day and like I love it. And he's like, no, like this is terrible. So, finding that if you're the me in the relationship where you love going through scenarios and like calculating things, or maybe you're like my husband who's like, this is terrible, you have to find that middle ground because or else you're going to, if I came to him every month with a budget binder, he would never listen to me. Like he would be like, tune me out, ignore me. So for us, we just keep money super conversational, just like you would talk to your partner about how your day was at work or things going on with the kids. That's how you want to get to his money. I mean, that takes time. I'm not saying this will happen overnight, but for us, when we were, deep into paying off debt, I'd be like, hey, we put $1,000 to the student loan today, or hey, we're at this point with our savings goal. Or now a lot of it is like, hey, do you have any expenses coming up in the next few months that I need to know about so I can prepare for it? So it's just starting to make money conversational, which obviously takes time. I mean, it took a lot of like my husband being like, I need $200 tomorrow for this, for me freaking out. So now he knows if he needs money for something, yeah, I need time to plan. And I'm never going to say no, right? Because if there's something that's important to him, it isn't, even if I don't think it's truly important, it's important to us as a couple and vice versa. So if there's something that's going to cost $400, that's fine. I just need time to plan or save or do things for it. So I think getting to the point of making money conversational, but that starts with understanding each other's money past. And that's a conversation that might be tougher to start with. But, how were you raised about money? Did you hear your parents talking about money? Did they teach you anything? Did you have money growing up? Did you, for example, like my husband had a lot of student loans and I didn't have as many, like he had 6-figure student loans and struggled with credit card debt. I never struggled with credit card debt. So like understanding for him, he can't just have 4 credit cards because he was used to just putting things on the credit card, which I didn't struggle with, but he did. So, I had to kind of put a system together. So really understanding first your own money past, obviously, but then having those conversations. And I think if one of you is a saver, one of you is a spender, back to our other point is that means you have to compromise. So I know if you are the spender, obviously you'll have to cut back a little, but to say you're going to spend nothing is also unrealistic. So you need to both give each other spending money. And then if you, are the saver, yes, you want to save, but you have to remember that your partner will need, if you want to keep your partner on board, you have to let your partner spend something or else it's back to that like deprivation and binge kind of cycle where you do really good for 2 months and then it's terrible. So it does take time. I think trying to make it as having these conversations when you're in the car or before you go to bed, just basic things like what is one budget line that you never want to cut, right? Like what is the one thing that's really important to you? Or what is something that you don't care about that if we had to reduce it, you wouldn't really think about? Or what is the one goal, what keeps you up at night? If you have debt, that's one thing I always ask people, like, what is the one debt that keeps you up at night? Or one thing, because for some people that is student loans. It really bothers them. For some people, student loans don't bother them at all. Same thing with savings. Like, what is one thing that you really want to save for? Some people, it's an emergency fund. Sometimes it's a trip. Sometimes it's a new car, whatever it is, you need to kind of start having those conversations. And it takes time to get on the same page. I mean, it took us a few years to obviously get to where we are now, but you won't get there unless you start having those conversations.
Yeah, I think it's so powerful, like you mentioned, to just recognize what each of you are bringing to the table, not necessarily what's in the bank account, but where your mindsets were developed. Like, how did your parents talk about money? How did they treat money? And what parts of that align with where you want to go? And what parts of that can we work through together? I know my husband and I have read all sorts of different books and listened to a lot of different podcasts to understand what limiting beliefs or what holds we had around spending or abundance or just all sorts of different things to help reframe and give ourselves money mindsets that we felt really good about, that are really going to move us forward instead of keeping us in maybe old patterns that we internalized or picked up along the way or whatnot. So I love that just conversation of understanding why someone does the thing that they do, the things that they do, instead of just being like, oh, well, I do it this way and your way is wrong. We need to do it like this. It's like, everyone does anything that they do for a reason, whether they're consciously aware of it or not. So the more we can understand the layers beneath, the better we can work forward to either change them or work with them. Like you said, if you know that this person is going to have a certain need when it comes to finances, okay, let's just work that in so we're not creating resistance. Love that. Okay, so what is some of the worst money advice that makes you cringe? I'm just personally so curious because you do love this so much.
Okay, I think there's a few. One would be that you have to become debt free before you save or do anything else, or there's advice where you shouldn't invest until you're debt free and all that. And I truly think that is terrible advice. Some people just have credit card debt, but some people have massive amounts. But most people becoming completely debt free does take multiple years. I'm not going to sit here and say that people are paying off $80,000 in 6 months. I mean, maybe some are, but for the majority of people I work with, if you have 50 plus K of total debt, student loans, credit card, it's taking you years. This isn't, so if you don't save or you save only $1,000, some kind of expense is going to occur in the next 4 years. That is more than $1,000 and probably a significant amount more. So if you don't have anything saved, all you're going to do is just put it on a credit card and you're continuing this cycle. It is tough, obviously. I know a lot of people want to get out of debt really fast, but you do have to find some kind of balance with saving, because if you don't, you're just going to stay in this kind of cycle of paying off debt, going back in, paying off credit card debt, going back into it because you don't have cash to pay it off. I always say, if you have a trip coming up next summer, it's next June, it's going to cost you $3,000. You have to make sure you're on track to save for that by June, because if not, you're just going to put it on the credit card and you worked so hard. If say you're trying to pay off credit card debt, you're working so hard to pay it off, and you're just going to put something else back on it. So you have to find that balance between saving and paying off debt. I hate when people say credit scores don't matter, because they 100% do matter. And I think even putting something towards retirement, even if it's $50 a month, I mean, that's what I started with my Roth IRA because that's all I could do at the time. But just building that habit of investing something, even if you can only do $25 while you're paying off debt, is really important. But I think the budgeting is restrictive probably bothers me the most, just because I'm if it's restrictive, that's truly your own fault. I mean, that's tough love, but if it is, then that's because of you. You can blame whatever book you read or blame me or I don't know, whoever. But if it is restrictive, that's because you made it restrictive and you have the power to not. So those are probably be the mainstream money advice.
Well, Alli, I know you have a lot of resources that exist in the world to help people if this conversation has gotten their wheels turning. So tell us more about how we can get in touch with you and what you bring to the table with this conversation.
Yeah, so Instagram is probably the social platform that I'm on the most. My phone tells me that, at least. When you get those alerts when it's like, you spent too much time on this, and you're like, oh gosh. So Instagram. So if you took anything away, I'd love for you to message me, reach out. I'd love to hear kind of what you're working on. I'm on Instagram way too much. But my website, which is financiallyfocused.com, it's spelled financially like ALLI, like my name. My website has I have blog posts. I update my blog like pretty much weekly. I have a free foundations course. I have a free workbook for getting on the same page with your partner. I have a ton of free resources for you to get started. So definitely check out my website, or if you're not sure where to start, send me a message on Instagram. Tell me a little bit about what you're struggling with, and I'll be like, this is what you need. Download that or sign up for that freebie, and I can tell you. So definitely reach out if you need anything at all.
Wonderful. Well, Alli, I am so grateful for our time together today. And the last question I ask every guest on the show is, what does personal growth mean to you in the season?
Honestly, I would say personal growth in this season, which for me is just the two under, not under two, but 2 at 2, end a business and running a household by myself, is just getting through the end of the day feeling like I did one thing better than I did the day before, or one thing better than I did earlier that week. And just that little small, for me at this point, it's like that small progress, that small growth really is adding up in my life, and understanding that this isn't a season of necessarily like instant leaps that are going to occur just because my schedule is really hectic and I have 2 little ones that need my constant attention. So being content that this isn't the season of leaps, but soaking in those little moments that I notice of growth each week at this point, or day, that I can hold on to and not be so concerned that I don't have those, huge wins every week. So that's probably what I would say.
Wonderful. Well, I am so grateful for this conversation and to just learn from you. I think it's just really cool when I find other women who live in rural communities who are so passionate about the work that you're doing, even though it's totally outside of what I know and what I'm passionate about. But if there's anything I learned, it takes all kinds of kinds. So thank you for sharing your love for this and your advice. And I know someone is going to walk away ready to have some conversations that maybe haven't been had, at least in a while. And so I appreciate that. So
yes, thank you so much. This was a really great conversation, and I appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely. All right, friends, until next time, I'm so forever grateful for you.
Have I told you today how much I appreciate you? I'd like to imagine this was a meaningful backyard patio kind of chat between friends sipping LaCroix at sunset. If you enjoyed today's show, please take a screenshot to share or forward this episode to a friend. You can also find me at Emily Rushell over on social to continue the conversation. It's truly a joy to hear what tidbits and takeaways made an impact on your day. As always, all links and resources mentioned in today's episode can be found in the show notes listed below or over at emilyrushell.com. Special thanks to my podcast manager, Jill Carr, for the time and love she puts into producing Gather and Growth for this community. What a blessing it is to be on this personal growth journey together. Forever grateful for you.